Hey, welcome back to Great American Movie Review. I am joined this time by Kyle
Hello
because he
there.
went to go see Godzilla Minus One, and I saw it a little bit ago, but didn't get around to making a video. But now we're here doing it.
Yeah, now I'm roping him into a review for once.
Right. yeah, I saw this when it came out a couple months ago. Kyle just got around to seeing it.
I saw it yesterday.
Yeah, so I have a little bit more history with Godzilla than you do. I've just been a fan of Godzilla for a while. I haven't seen every Godzilla film, but I've seen a handful of them. I've always enjoyed them. I've kept up a lot with the recent American MonsterVerse films, and I saw Toho's last Shin Godzilla. So I was very excited for this when this came out.
By the American Godzilla ones, you mean I assume 2014 and then
The
the
Legendary
the
Pictures
the
ones, yeah.
Kong ones,
Mm-hmm.
like the versus
Yeah,
Kong. Yeah.
yeah.
I haven't seen those. Well, I did see the 2014 version and I saw the much beloved 2001 with Matthew
Matthew
Broderick.
Broderick. Oh
Yeah.
yes.
So that is my history with Godzilla. I haven't seen the original and I have yet to see a single Japanese one besides this one.
So this is your first Japanese one.
This is my first Japanese Godzilla film.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, honestly, this is a great one to be your
If
first
you
one.
asterisk if you count, I think it's the first Austin Powers movie where
That's the
Godzilla is where
no.
Godzilla is
It's the
the
third
gag
one.
of it's it's Goldmember.
I
Okay,
just watched the third one, so I know.
yeah. It may look like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not.
So
Still, we
yeah,
should run like it is Godzilla. No,
that
it
counts
isn't.
then. I say.
Yeah, technically, it is look, it's Godzilla, and he's in a movie. Therefore, it is a Godzilla movie.
But this is a really good one to be your first Japanese one. It really it doesn't have any connections to the other ones, so it's just
Thank
kind of
goodness.
starts fresh from the beginning, same time period as the original with that World War II connection. But yeah, so like usual, we're gonna keep this spoiler free. However, since this movie has been out for a couple months now in the U.S., in the second half we will go into some spoilers about plot related stuff.
Yeah, I don't think we'll talk about anything, but there are some things that I think should be brought up to anybody like wanting to take a look at this maybe. Like
Yeah,
if they don't mind like a little bit of spoilers.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I absolutely loved this movie. This was so great. I wasn't sure what I was going to get from it. I just thought that I was like, cool, new Godzilla movie, let's go see it. And it pleased me to no end. I was like, this is terrific. And one of the best, if not the best, Godzilla movie that's ever been made. The original obviously holds a very specific place, and its thematic material cannot be replicated exactly because it came out in 1954. Still, Japan was still in recovery from wartime, and it was really this just cautionary tale because they're trying to develop this technology that could be used to wipe out, you know, lots of life on Earth. And they were debating whether or not they should use it. That's a big part of that movie to defeat Godzilla. So it was really smart, I think, to take it back to those original roots, back into the World War II time frame, and just kind of let's just start clean and just kind of have a new spin on Godzilla here. But Kyle, what did you think of this?
So I agree with you. I think this is I mean, given the Godzilla movies that I've seen previously, I think this is the best one that I've seen. What I particularly like about it is how simple and emotional it is.
Yes.
Because there's not really much to it plot wise
No.
outside of it. I'll I'll say this: it is not subtle
No, not at all.
with its messaging, and the messaging is the entirety of the storytelling
Which
here.
neither was the original. Like that's also where this falls more closely to that original is in the way it presents its messaging.
But that's also I do know the story of like how Godzilla came to be, like given the
Right.
nuclear environment of the time, especially in the 50s. There was much confusion and there was a great deal that was hidden from people,
Yeah.
and there was a great deal of unknown and fear. And that's where most of the like Creature from the Black Lagoon, the like invasion stuff, especially space at the time.
Yeah.
Because when new technology is made, people don't exactly know what is going to happen from it. They don't know the butterfly effect of what occurs afterwards. And
Right.
the creation of the nuclear bomb arguably is the most important piece of technology that we have created because of how much it shapes society going forth.
Yeah.
So making a story about that is, like you said, a cautionary tale, but more so just the consequences to our actions
Right.
in the country that the only time that this weapon has been used to was against them. Yeah,
Right.
that's pretty hard stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Because that's the whole titling of this movie, as it's been explained, is that after the war, which Japan was absolutely just decimated during World War II before the atomic bomb went
not
off
just by
twice. Yeah,
not
the
just by the
firebombs
nuclear
killed
bombs.
way more people, or not way more, but
They did.
it
It
was already
absolutely did.
decimated. The atomic bomb was just the period at the end of that, you know.
But the atomic bombs were also, nothing had ever caused that much damage from one
Right.
single event. Bombings, the fire bombings of like Tokyo, Kobe, and a bunch of other cities that I can't name all of them because there were so many. That killed hundreds of thousands of people, but
Right.
it took place over months.
Right.
Whereas these two bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki took place just 3 days apart and involved pretty much just two bombers coming in.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting for this to come out the same year as Oppenheimer, dealing with it very much from an American perspective, the person actually making the bomb.
Yeah.
And kind of that one got some criticism. The main criticism, honestly, against that movie was that it never showed the Japanese perspective. And I'm like, that's fair, but there are lots of Japanese films that are showing that perspective, I think, in a better way than that movie ever could have.
It's not about the nuclear bombings, but Grave of the Fireflies does it best.
Right. Grave of the Fireflies is a great example. Honestly, the original Godzilla, and now this Godzilla as well. I think using the lens of genre to tell this kind of story is such a great, I think, way in to tapping into what they're trying to say.
Yeah, that's kind of why I don't like the 2014 and 2000 movies, is because Americans took the story that was made by the victims of such an atrocious invention and made it so that it was attacking like LA.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I like the 2014 one in the way that it kind of
It's
presents
gritty nature, yeah.
Godzilla just as this force of nature, and what are we even to do when nature comes back, and just like that kind of ideal. I think the 2014 film nails. They've gotten goofier as they've gone along and introduced more monsters, but that's just the nature of Godzilla, and I think there's fun to be had in that as well. But the best Godzilla stuff is always the more grounded Godzilla stuff, and this, going back to that original spot once again, I think was just a great way to tap into that kind of mentality again, because it's still a kaiju film, and that's
Yeah.
what you're talking about with the plot. Like in a kaiju film, the plot is typically giant kaiju shows up and we have to defeat it somehow because it is destroying people and cities. So
That's true, but there is, I will say this, the plot's very simple, but there's a surprising amount of character work in this movie
yes, that's what this movie
compared to
does.
other kaiju movies.
Right. That's what this movie, it's a rare feat for like a kaiju movie to pull off, having actual great characters with real emotional depth. So I mean, from a plot perspective, just the general synopsis here is your main character here is Koichi. I believe is your name. Pardon pronunciations. We're not Japanese. Um, but he is a suicide bomber, and he was abandoning his mission because he didn't want to die. So, and then he ends up encountering Godzilla, and then
So, yeah,
having to go back and just try to live with that information for a bit until Godzilla shows back up again and wreaks
for
havoc.
context for the Japanese culture, when World War II was occurring, there was nothing more glorious than a death in wartime and combat. And surrendering was absolutely not an option, ever, under any circumstances. In fact, when Emperor Hirohito did surrender after the dropping of the nuclear bombs, and also the Soviet Union had just declared war on Japan as well, when that occurred, that was a huge blow to Japanese culture. So before the end of the war, they were called kamikaze pilots specifically because, in the chance that you can't make it back and in the chance that you don't have any more weapons, you will suicide bomb to take out as many Americans as possible.
Yeah.
And that was a staple of Japanese warfare at the time, especially when they were on the back foot close to the end of the war.
Right.
So coming back with nothing faulty in your plane, still having your weapons, which I noticed he still had his bomb and also still ammo in his, I believe it's a 20 millimeter cannon. Still having any type of ammunition coming back as a kamikaze pilot, especially, that's a huge no-no.
Yeah.
So
So after he ends up making his way back to the mainland and everything's decimated, he ends up finding some place to live basically, and I think he goes back to
I
his
think
own
it was his
house.
house,
It
yeah,
was his
because it was his
house,
neighborhood because
but he
his
had
neighbor knew him.
he had a squatter, and her name was Noriko, and she was
She stole a baby, I
yes,
think.
Noriko had a little girl, and they kind of become this pseudo family, and you get kind of years going on. He joins this crew where they go in the boat and they blow up mines, like they get on a gun and just shoot mines that are still in the ocean. And so that's how he keeps making money. And then you get the re-emergence of Godzilla, who he had already had a run-in with one time, but nobody really believed him. And then you get Godzilla actually coming out and just wrecking havoc, and people then they're trying to come to terms with like, well, how do we defeat this, especially in post-war Japan, where we've been demilitarized basically, like
Yeah.
like we don't have access to any of our resources to actually engage in warfare with this giant monster that can just completely destroy us. We don't know how to defeat. So it's them thinking creatively on how to do that. It's this guy
Not
dealing
only
with
that, but
his guilt.
they can't turn to the Soviets, obviously, and they
Yeah,
definitely can't turn to the US for military aid when they're in a Cold War with the Soviets right
yeah,
as soon as World War II ends. So
right. Yeah, so just kind of dealing with all of that, plus he has all of the shame from like abandoning, what his responsibilities were, even though he did it because he didn't want to die, and that's a big thing with that character throughout this movie, is just kind of that will to live, and that duty, that feeling of duty that he needs to fulfill. And so, yeah, and then, yeah, you have Noriko, and like I said, they become this kind of really interesting little family unit. And there's just so much heart in that kind of part of the film. The character work, like you said, is just really good, especially for a movie like this. But independent of a movie like this, it's still good, compelling characters that I would watch.
yeah, and I also appreciate the fact that because of the culture of Japanese honor and that kind of thing at the time, even after the war, I appreciate a Japanese movie that's willing to address it,
Right.
even if it doesn't have to be negative all the time about it, because it's
Yeah.
certainly an interesting, if it's an unfortunate, but it is an interesting culture to have. But I appreciate that it's looking at it through a different lens, well,
Right.
through that kind of same lens, but taking another look and thinking about it.
Yeah. To some extent, it's a lens that they maybe even couldn't have done back in the 50s.
Definitely not.
So being able to go back, that's where I think that this movie kind of has a leg up even on the original Godzilla, which is a great film in its own right.
It has the
Um,
benefit of hindsight.
yeah, the original has the benefit of timeliness, and this one has the benefit of hindsight. I think they stand pretty well next to each other as the pinnacle of Godzilla films. But the fact that we're getting like another like Godzilla film that I think is as good, if not better, than the original in 2024, which is what, how many, like 70 years later,
Yeah, 70.
is incredible. That's just the longevity of that, property. Like just being able to still make something as good as this. All right, so we're going to get a little bit more into spoilers from this point on in the video. It's not, once again, it's not going to be too deep into anything, but I mean,
I don't think it'll be specifics. I think
there
it'll
will
be
be
more
some
broad.
plot points and stuff that we bring up. So, but yeah, well, moving on.
The threat of nuclear warfare, and especially because it's not just the threat of nuclear warfare and its consequences. I also like how Godzilla is a little bit like the shame of Koike, the
Yeah.
main character. And as soon as he beats him, his struggle is overcoming both shame and stalling and allowing people to die, and then
Yeah.
also overcoming his acceptance of what he's done. Essentially, the entire plot revolving around Godzilla, especially because we are introduced to Godzilla because of the shame of failing his mission. And
Hmm.
it's not until Godzilla is taken care of and the after effects of his shame and of what he
Right.
failed to do is is when he has a weight lifted over on off of his shoulders. So taking into account, I got the double meaning that Godzilla was the consequences of the nuclear bomb, but it's also the consequences of Koiki's actions.
Right. They tied it more personally into this character.
It was
And
both broad and personal, is what
yeah,
I
yeah,
took from it.
because there's this whole thing of like whether like he wants to join up to fight Godzilla with the people who are around to do so.
Yeah.
And he wants to take even like a really pivotal role in that fight where he's flying the plane because he's a pilot, you know. So that's what he's good at.
I mean,
And
he's
so
literally doing what his job was supposed to be, but for a
right.
different reason. So, yeah.
Right, to release himself from that shame that he had on himself to fulfill that is kind of, yeah, it's a great kind of double thing going on, both narratively and thematically. There's a lot going on with that kind of Godzilla and Koichi dynamic, if you can call it
What I
that.
would say is the only thing I don't really like about the plot is his entourage that he joins up with to demine the ocean.
Yeah.
Their characters with regard to the main character is pretty flimsy.
I mean, they're a
I gotta
little
say.
silly, but I like them.
No, no, no. But like the ship captain getting angry about him wanting to take out Godzilla any means necessary, especially because he's like, you're just trying to avenge your dead wife or dead person that you met and have grown attached to. And it's like, yes, would you not also want to do that
Right, right. Because
if it
yeah,
means saving more people? Like
yeah.
that whole thing really doesn't make sense to me.
Because there's a whole point where in the middle of the, so first of all I want to talk about like the actual destruction aspect of this movie.
Sure.
Incredible. Like this movie, the Oscar nomination just came out, and this one did get a best visual effects nomination. It doesn't.
Which means the director and writer also got nominated, so he also could win an award, which I
Oh
love.
yeah, so the yeah, with the visual effects and everything, like there's been a lot of discourse around the actual budget of this movie. It doesn't matter the specifics, but what does matter is this movie doesn't have a Hollywood sized budget, but they really make use of it. And there's not like, it's not like action scene after action scene after action scene like you'd see in one of the American Godzilla movies of late.
But there is a surprising amount of action in this,
Yes.
especially given monster films are so
Yeah.
prone to not show the monster as much.
Yeah. This one will show to you as much as I think they're able to. And there's one particular scene kind of in the middle of just mass destruction that is absolutely jaw dropping. There's one particular shot where she saves him, she pushes him away and just gets blasted away by like the
Narratively,
impact
it's
of it.
important, but man, is it clunky.
It's so good though. Like the actual destruction and just like the impact of like the force of this creature and like his breath and everything when he does that, it's just incredible.
Yeah,
Like
the build up where his the
oh yeah,
on
the
his back, his
yes,
the
so
spikes coming out
cool.
of his spine just lock out
Yeah.
all up his tail.
While this isn't connected to Shin Godzilla, Toho's previous Godzilla film, that was made by Anno, the guy who did Neon Genesis Evangelion, and frankly, you can tell with that movie, and that movie is really cool in its own right. I see how they kind of took some of the ideas that they did there, because within the live action Godzilla format, they kind of captured that feeling of like almost the rubber suit kind of thing, but making it feel real at the same time.
Kind of puppety, but also
Yeah,
more chiseled.
yeah, and this one I think that one Godzilla is really like genuinely scary looking in that one. This one they kind of found the right blend, I think, in the evolution of it to tell a more straightforward Godzilla movie than that one is. And but I think the design here might be like the best Godzilla design that they've ever been able to do. It's just so good. Like everything about it, from like you said, those spikes when with the build up, but then also like just the impact of the explosions, the size, the scale, the tail is great.
He's got some girth around the waist.
Yeah, but he's not like beefy like the American Godzilla. So,
Yeah, not like the 2014 one.
which I do like that design too, but I still prefer this kind of classic look to it, and bringing it into the modern, look and make it convincing. They do a phenomenal job with that. But was there anything else that you wanted to talk about specifically with it?
Yeah. So the reports are between 10 to 15 million, which I kind of believe because of the fact that the visual effects are amazing, and especially for if it's 10 to 15 million, and especially because I've seen 250 million dollar movies that look nowhere as
Yeah.
good. But I also just want to say that this is one of the best depictions of Japanese wartime
Yes.
periods.
Yeah, no, it's really great in like the world building aspect of the Japan post-war era and late war era is really well done.
Especially showing the differences in Koiki's home, especially because they keep jumping around in time, showing the differences and how much progress they make on the house, as well as just
Right.
the rest of Japan.
Yeah, like there's progress, and like you start to see houses become a little bit more well formed as the movie goes on, but there's never this sense that like the recovery is happening quickly, you know?
Yeah.
Like there's still just desolation
And I'll
around.
say this, Americans did destroy Japan, and that sucks. But we also did help rebuild them. So, yay, us,
I
I
mean, I know
guess,
America and
for a
Japan
second.
have good relations in, nowadays.
It's
Oh,
kind of impressive, small
right.
tangent, but it's kind of impressive what we were able to do with the rest of Europe, especially Western Germany and Japan, but we can't do so in the Middle East ever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, honestly.
it, I don't know. Maybe the bureaucrats in the 40s and 50s were just a lot better at
Yeah,
doing that.
for sure.
I know Douglas MacArthur wasn't a reason for that though. Maybe he was overseeing the military occupation, but man, he was kind of a dick.
All right.
But
Well,
yeah, I think that's a yeah.
yeah. Yeah, to me it's one of the best movies of the year, just period. I think that it's a phenomenal film. Japan has had a very strong year this year, frankly, just in general.
Yeah.
And if anybody's like, why didn't it get an international feature nomination? Japan didn't put it up for international feature. The one they did put up did also get nominated for
It's because they know
international.
it's a
So
dark horse for visual effects,
right,
probably.
right. So they got, they have multiple films because they also have The Boy and the Heron nominated in
Which could
animated.
very
So
well easily win
this is like the
animated.
most well represented Japan has been in the Academy Awards maybe ever, and there are still some snubs that happened there for sure, like
Yeah.
Suzume not getting an animation nomination. I mean, come on. But and that's not to say that there aren't even other ones that I haven't even seen yet that are also great that I've heard. So but either way, um any anything else from you?
Nope.
All right, well then that does it for this mini review for Godzilla Minus One. We love it. If you get a chance to see it, if it's still playing, they actually just put out the black and white version, back again wide release, so you can go and watch that version if you want. But yeah, that'll do it for us on Great American Movie Review. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you at the movies.